We're going to move to a sort of a real technical challenge, and again, I'd encourage panelists to get as technical as you want on this one. I'd like to start with Jason. How would you re-decentralize web search?
So for this one, I'm sort of drawing on some of the work that we've been doing on ad hoc and mesh networks. I think a lot of web search right now is really designed with centralized networks in mind, where you can have central entities that crawl everything and then keep like a record of everything, and then you search that record of everything. But there's a sort of newer class of and that all depends on like centralized routing with like hierarchical DNS and all this sort of stuff. But there's some newer classes of routing algorithms that are almost like focused on the content itself. So being able to subscribe to interesting topics and then getting content discovered in that sort of way. So you can do things like discover content based on like hashtags or metadata that's associated with the data. And it actually gets delivered to you based on that. So it's not even necessarily like a search engine. It's actually like the content itself gets delivered to your device based on what you're interested in. So those are classified as like content-centric routing or those types of approaches.
Interesting. Barry.
Okay, so I made some notes here so I could reference some numbers. The first note is that it's fairly straightforward. I think that's a bit odd to say for web scale search, but okay. A lot of the problems people have done before. They've solved them before. So if you need to know how to do it, then you have sources to look at. The harder problems are the ones that no one has solved yet. But in this case, I did some estimates. If we had a decentralized case, we'd be talking each individual search would hit about, say, I would say 1 million nodes. So these are some numbers I'm throwing out. Each individual node, responding in about, say, 100 milliseconds would be kind of reasonable. And that would correspond with about 1/10 of a cent in the actual cost of electricity for spread out across all those 1 million nodes. In terms of how much data you'd be looking at, perhaps about 1.2 gigabytes per phone for the index, or at least, say the HTML data. And if you wanted the entire web, it would have to be probably around 70 gigs for each of those million phones. Then, in order to actually get throughput, because with search you have to scale both in terms of how much data you're searching, as well as how much throughput you want to throw at it. And if you want to do about 100,000 searches per second, you probably need about, in total, about 10 billion nodes running with something like this, using kind of the same ideas that Google's using for its search, that Bing's using for its search, that Blecko used for its search. I think the more interesting question is making the algorithms a bit more open. So being able to say, I want to search the web in this way. I want to be able to define my own bubble that I'm going to search in. So be able to define my own ranking algorithms and whatnot. And not only that, but incentivizing people to create their own modifications to the search engine. So having AI researchers create their own modifications to the search, and then allowing the network to test those out and combine the best results together to make an even better search.
Russell.
Yeah, to follow on with that, you have great ideas. I also didn't make any notes. I just found out the topic, so I'm just thinking out loud.
I mean, part of this is kind of,
Barry's been crunching
there's
numbers.
going to be a lot of overlap between our
But yeah, those
solutions,
were interesting numbers. I guess for me, it relates well to what I think will be an interesting challenge, which is, like, we've got these shared digital systems that are being built. And there's, the promises of it, like the values unlocked by these interoperable services, right? Lots of parties bring online to create these new types of network effects in the technology stack. And so I'm not like looking, let's say, for a service. I'm like looking for a service while I'm using another service. So I think the tailoring of AI, let's say, to say, okay, I'm at point X in a real estate transaction. Oh, by the way, this is like the legal service on the blockchain that other people in your situation have used. Like I think that type of search will be new and valuable and possible with the types of systems that people have been speaking about today.
So you're aiming at something actually better than existing web search,
Or
is
like
it?
search for the decentralized web. Yeah.
Ben?
Yeah, I think, of course, there's a lot of overlap here, which makes sense. My immediate thought when you pose this was SingularityNET or other decentralized AI technologies can be used to decentralize the search algorithm, or I mean more broadly, like the algorithm for exploring and utilizing information, right? So in the simplest case, you have a bunch of different agents doing search by different algorithms, and you could either consciously on your own or in an automated way, you choose which one is going to meet your needs best in a certain context. But then what occurred to me is, following that approach, probably the creativity that comes with having a decentralized ecosystem where different developers can put different information retrieval and exploration algorithms into the network, that will lead rapidly to a deviation from the current paradigm of web search. And then you start to think about, web search now, why is it the way it is? Partly it's inertia from history, partly it's designed so as to lead to the owners of the search engine getting the best information from you to fuel their advertising engines, right? And so if that motivation is eliminated from the search and information retrieval agents, so their goal is no longer to gather your data to fuel ad placement, then it's possible that can lead to much more creativity and to evolution of different ways of exploring information in the first place. So yeah, basically the idea is re-decentralizing web search will rapidly lead to a growth beyond web search toward better ways of interacting with information, and probably a great diversity of different ways of interacting with different types of information.
It's interesting. One of the challenges I think we all face talking about this subject is we've really reached like a local maxima in terms of the technology, right? And it's very difficult actually to do better than centralized services right now. And what we're talking about is how to do the work to get us beyond that to things that are better.